Hello, and welcome everyone to the Varsity Tutors Star Course series, where today we are so excited to be joined once again by Wonders of Wildlife educator Justin Kirkpatrick to learn all about an amazing Antarctic animal, the penguin. So whether you know them for their happy feet, their adorable mannerisms, or maybe from a character from a TV show or movie you know, there is so much more to know about these amazing creatures. Now, before we head off on today's penguin parade, I want to be sure everyone knows how to interact in our live learning classroom today. So feel free to use the chat button to both ask and answer questions throughout the class. And if we don't get to your questions right away, not to worry, we're going to take about 10 minutes at the close of the lesson specifically set aside for Q&A. You'll also want to be sure that you have your cameras close by, because toward the end of the class, we're going to have the opportunity to lean into the screen and pose for a selfie. And if you post those selfies on Instagram and you tag us here at Varsity Tutors as well as Wonders of Wildlife, you'll be entered to win a 1-month subscription to Wildlife Creature Club. I'll talk a little bit more about that prize and the details on how to enter in just a little bit. But in the meantime, we're going to go ahead and dive on in. I'm going to hand things off to your instructor for today, Justin Kirkpatrick.
Hi, everyone. I hope everyone's having a really good day out there. It's your favorite educator, Justin, here at Wonders of Wildlife, located right here in Springfield, Missouri. Very beautiful place. I hope you guys are having a great time wherever you may be. And before we get started, I just want everyone in the chat to just go ahead and type in wherever they're tuning in from. I know last time we did this, we had so many people from all over the country and even some other countries, and it was a really awesome experience. I see those cities pouring into the chat there. Shout out to Boston. Go Red Sox. All right. Sorry, Kansas City Royals. You guys are cool too. I like the Red Sox. But anyway, thank you all for joining us. I hope you guys are excited. Now, what I like to do best is take a special blend of history and animals and create a history of animals lesson that I hope is really fun for you guys. And so today what we're going to be doing is talking about penguins and talking about the history of penguins and sort of where they come from and how awesome they are. So without further ado, I have to ask the big question: what in the world is a penguin, right? We got to start somewhere. So penguins are a group of aquatic birds that live in the southern hemisphere, which is right here on Earth. So what we have here is the equator. The equator is a very long line around the Earth that is the middle of its spherical shape. Now, below the equator is what we call the southern hemisphere. The southern hemisphere is where penguins are mostly going to live, mainly in South America, Africa, Australia, New Zealand, and especially down here at the South Pole in Antarctica. Now, if you're like me and you're from the United States, we live on the northern half of this globe here, right here in this place called the United States. Now, I say penguins are mostly from the southern hemisphere because right here are a special group of islands called the Galapagos Islands. And some penguins are known to live there. And you'll see it's right on the equator. So sometimes you can find penguins a little bit north of the equator and therefore in the northern hemisphere. But more than likely, where you're going to find penguins are down here in Antarctica, which also means that we're not going to find penguins hanging out with Santa up here at the North Pole. Instead, he gets to hang around with polar bears and walruses, which are pretty cool too. So without further ado, we'll keep going. So a little bit more about penguins. There are 18 species of penguins, and there's a lot of biodiversity between them. The tallest penguin is the emperor penguin, which stands between 3.5 and 4 feet tall, which is pretty big. And the smallest penguin is the little blue penguin, which is between 13 inches and 17 inches, which is really tiny and super adorable. And part of the reason we all love penguins is because they're so cute, right? All right. So did you know we call this program Penguin Parade, which means a lot of penguins, right? Because we're going to talk about a lot of them. But did you know a group of penguins in the water is called a raft, while a group of penguins on land is called a waddle because they like to waddle back and forth? So penguins are excellent swimmers. They are streamlined to go as quickly as they can through the water. And their bones are hollow and or their bones are solid instead of hollow like other birds, which make them buoyant in the water and help them swim. Now, here at Wonders of Wildlife, we have a very special species of penguins that we call the Gen 2 penguins. Gen 2 penguins are the fastest penguins on Earth. They can swim up to 25 miles per hour, which is pretty fast considering how quickly they're going through the water there. So those penguins live to be about 15 years old in the wild, but in human care, they can live up to 30. In fact, here at Wonders of Wildlife, we have penguins who hatched before I was even born. Can you believe that? They're a year older than me. So if we're watching the special video that we have up there of our penguins walking around, they're actually have bands on their flippers, which are color coded and tell us the name of that penguin and also whether they're male or female, which is a lot of fun. So you'll also see that penguins have their special, very refined tuxedo coloration to them on their feathers. So on their back feathers, they're pretty black, right? Look like a tuxedo coat. That is actually a special form of camouflage. So that camouflage helps protect them from any predators who might be above the penguin in the water because they'll blend in with the murky depths of the ocean. Now, on the reverse side, the feathers on their chest are a white color, look like an undershirt of a tuxedo. So that actually protects from predators who might be below the penguin, because when they look up, the white of the feathers will blend in with the sky beaming through the ocean. Now, penguins don't have any natural predators on land, but in the water, they can fall prey to orcas and sea lions. So they really want that camouflage to protect them from anything in the water. So I mentioned that their bones help them be buoyant in the water, and it helps them float. So now that we've learned a little bit about penguins, what I want to do is play a very special game with you guys. It's called Guess That Ancestor. And you guys are all coming on down and going to answer in the chat box. So what I have on screen are 3 pictures of animals that lived thousands and thousands of years ago. They obviously don't live in this form today or before recorded history, but they have some ancestors that have adapted to look a little bit different than they do. So what you're going to do in the chat is I'll say a letter of a picture, and then you're going to type in the chat and tell me what you think is the modern animal that the pictured animal is an ancestor of. So picture A that we have on screen has a lot of armor on its back and tail and its head. It looks like a mammal. So let's see if we can get anything going in the chat and see if we can guess what that ancestor of the animal is. All right, so we got some good guesses rolling in. All right, I see some good answers. All right, someone said a pig. I'm not so sure about pig, but we're on the right track, right? It looks like a mammal. It has hair. Looks like it's warm-blooded. All right, so picture A is actually the ancestor that lived thousands of years ago of modern-day armadillos. And we can kind of see in this artistic representation sort of the armadillo shape and the shell that forms an armadillo's armor, right? So let's move on to picture B. Picture B looks like a woolly mammoth to me. And let's get those guesses in. Let's see what the modern day equivalent of a woolly mammoth would be. Some really good guesses out there. And you are correct. Yes, this one's a little bit more obvious than picture A, but the Asian elephant is actually the modern ancestor of woolly mammoths that lived thousands and thousands of years ago and have adapted to change to a different environment. So picture C here is actually my tricky one, and I want to see if anyone can guess it. So this animal is an artistic representation of a saber-toothed tiger, which lived thousands of years ago, just like the woolly mammoth and the ancestor of the armadillo. So let's see if we can try and guess what the modern day version of a saber-toothed tiger is. See, I see it tricking some of you out there. That name, saber-toothed tiger, can be a little bit tricky. All right, so picture C, a saber-toothed tiger. What is the modern day ancestor? It's actually the clouded leopard. So good job to some of you out there that guessed that. Bengal tigers and African lions are actually farther down the evolutionary tree than our clouded leopards. And so I hear you out there thinking to yourself, why in the world did we just play a game called Guess That Ancestor and none of those were the ancestor of penguins? Well, that's because penguins did have an ancestor millions and millions of years ago. In fact, 66 million years ago, they had their own ancestor called the Waimanu penguin. And this Waimanu penguin walked around in New Zealand. And I see some of you doing the math out there. Yes, 66 million years ago would place the Waimanu penguin right in the smack dab of the late Cretaceous era, along with the dinosaurs. So over the years, several ancestors would continue to go on, and 37 million years ago, the tallest penguin walked around. This penguin stood at 6'6" tall, which is the same height as pro basketball players Kobe Bryant and Michael Jordan. I wanted to say LeBron because I figured most of you would know who LeBron is, but LeBron's 6'9". He's a little bit taller than this penguin, and that penguin would be a lot taller than me. So where do we get the word penguin? Penguin actually comes from the 16th century. That's when it was first recorded as a synonym for the great auk. Great auks are northern hemisphere birds that are not related to penguins at all, but they kind of look similar. These penguins, these Waimanu birds, so not penguins at all, lived in the northern hemisphere, and they were hunted they were actually hunted to extinction in the 1800s. It was a force of overhunting and climate change, which left them to be prey to polar bears more often than not. That led to their extinction. But the last of the birds were harvested and set up taxidermied in museums so people could still see the great auk. But that's where we get that word penguin. And once explorers started exploring Antarctica more in the early 1900s, they're going to see penguins and think that they're the same birds as great auks. And then they're going to associate the word penguin with them. And that's where we get the word penguin. Penguins are going to become very, very, very famous as more explorers go to in the 1900s, go to Antarctica and bring back stories about these flightless birds. So now I want to talk about mating rituals that penguins have. They can be quite elaborate. Now, penguins are very social birds. They like to live in big groups and they like to breed in those large groups up on the ice. So, which is really cool because they are monogamous pairs. They will find one each season and they will stick with them and they will hatch eggs. Most penguins lay 2 eggs in a clutch, while the emperor penguin, the largest one I was talking about, that's about 4 foot tall, lays only 1. In most penguin species, both parents are going to take turns incubating that egg, which means just sort of taking care of that egg and helping it hatch. But emperor penguins, again, being a little bit different, males will take care of the egg while females go off to find food and sustenance for both of them, which is pretty interesting. Penguins are also known to form very long-lasting same-sex couples. In fact, in the Central Park Zoo, there were 2 male penguins who hatched and took care of an egg, a fertilized egg that they had been given, which is really fun. So the Gentoo penguins, the one that we watched that video of and that we have here at Wonders of Wildlife, have a very elaborate mating display, which includes rocks. So Gentoo penguins in the wild live in very rocky shores. And so what happens is male penguins will find the shiniest, smoothest rock that they can and bring it to the female in order to form their nest. And females get to choose whether they want that rock and that mate in their lives, or they can reject that rock and say, hold on, I'm looking for something way better. we do something similar with our engagement rings, right? So one penguin I want to talk about that had a very famous love and romance story actually comes out of Japan. His name was Grape. Grape was a Humboldt penguin that lived in a zoo in Japan, who had become socially ostracized or sort of separated from his social group. He was a bit of an older penguin and just got separated from his mate, and so everyone just sort of shunned him. In 2017, that zoo started a special promotion where they would put anime characters from a cartoon that they have over there all over the zoo to sort of draw people in. And one of the characters from the anime that was being placed around the zoo just happened to be an anthropomorphic Humboldt penguin. Now, anthropomorphic is a very large word, which means human characteristics. So the cutout kind of looked like a humanized penguin. And so they put it in the penguin exhibit with Grape the penguin. Grape became infatuated or in love with this cutout where he would stare at it for hours and hours on end. In fact, in order to get Grape the food and nutrients that he needed, the keepers had to sort of section him off from the cardboard cutout display, which he did stare at it, performed a mating ritual in front of it where he would stand with his little flippers out and his beak up to the sky, and he would call out to it. Eventually, they would put pictures and videos of this on the internet, and he became an internet celebrity. People loved Grape, and he brought a lot of visitors to the zoo. But later that year, and even the voice actress who voiced the character that the cardboard cutout was of, came to the zoo and visited him. And actually, that's her holding him in that picture. Although I wouldn't hold a penguin that way, but she's a little bit braver than me. Unfortunately, later that year, Grape passed away in 2017, and the zoo, in his honor, put a shrine up for him for people to come and share their stories about how they loved Grape. And then they put a second cardboard cutout in the Humboldt penguin exhibit that shows the anime character and Grape together, finally at last. Brings a tear to my eye. Good old romantic love story. So now that we've talked a little bit about penguins and a little bit about their history, I want to talk a little bit about how penguins have influenced us. So penguins have been a part of pop culture from early in the 1900s. Remember those stories of travelers bringing them back to the Western world inspired a lot of people. They really, really love penguins and really love putting them in cartoons and movies and even some of our sports teams. So we're going to play another game here where I'm going to put up a bunch of pictures of penguins in pop culture. And I want to see if you can name as many penguins or penguin inspired things as possible. So go ahead and write in that chat which penguins you see. I see some of you like the porgs from Star Wars. A fun fact, those were actually puffins, which are different than penguins, but they were on the island that they were shooting, and so they just CGI'd the porgs over the puffins to sort of keep that mystical space experience that we all love in Star Wars. See Gunter? Yes. Oh, the Pittsburgh Penguins. I see some of you hockey fans out there. Yeah, go Pens. All right, Youngstown State. Yes, that is the Youngstown State University mascot right there in Youngstown, Ohio. All right, so see a lot of really good answers out there. I'm loving it. Surf's Up. I love that movie. It inspired my surfer hair. All right, that is perfect. So now what we want to do is do a very special photo with you guys. So Haley at the top mentioned that we have an opportunity for a selfie, right? So what you'll do is get out your phone, make sure that you're next to the camera, and we're going to actually take a picture with this Gen 2 penguin skull. Now this skull was 3D printed for us and is the replica of what their skull looks like. So you can kind of get a really good idea of how cool these penguins look like and how interesting their bones are and how bird-like they are because they're birds. So go ahead and get that picture going. So we'll give you 20 to 30 seconds to get that photo.
All right, and as a quick reminder, everyone, while you're getting those photos, don't forget to post those photos on Instagram and tag us here at Varsity Tutors as well as Wonders of Wildlife, and you'll be entered to win that membership to Wildlife Creature Club, where you and your fellow explorers can learn about all sorts of animals, from the penguins we saw today to perhaps animals that live in less Antarctic regions as well. So by all means, I'll give you just a few more seconds to snap that photo. All right, wonderful. Thank you so much, Justin. That is so cool. And we've got some even cooler questions coming in from the chat. Are you ready to take on a few of the questions from our Q&A?
Of course. Send all the questions that you have. I would love to answer them.
Awesome. So one big question that we got a lot of is we had students who are wondering why it is that penguins court the way that they do, whether it's, you know, these kind of elaborate rituals that they have and everything to deciding to have the same partner throughout the season. What's the cause behind that?
Yeah, so when you live in such extreme environments like the Antarctic or somewhere where it's super cold like that, it's very important to find a mate to pass along a really strong lineage. And so what penguins are trying to do is prove that they are the best penguin that they possibly can be in order to strengthen future generations of penguins. So a lot of animals have elaborate mating and dating rituals, right? Even humans. So even birds of paradise who will do elaborate dances, or there are spiders out there that will wave their arms back and forth at a mate to try and catch their attention. So it is not something unheard of in the animal kingdom. It's actually quite common. So yeah, what they're trying to do is, especially the Gen 2 penguin with those pebbles, is build the strongest nest that they possibly can. And that's why they're able to go out, find the shiniest, smoothest rock that they can, and then present it to the female. It's a way of saying, I can provide for you. You know, I can find this shiny rock. I can also find some fish for us to eat while we're incubating our eggs.
Wow, that is so cool. And I know you probably have a little bit of a soft spot for the penguins there at your location at Wonders of Wildlife. But we had lots of students who were wondering if you have a favorite type of penguin and maybe why it's your favorite type of penguin.
That's a really good question. So the ones that I've worked with are, of course, the Gen 2 penguins. I've got to go in to their enclosure and see them quite a few times. I really like them. It's become commonplace for me to make that joke about them being older than me because one is, and she is my absolute favorite. Her name is Reese. And we actually do a penguin encounter here at Wonders of Wildlife where some of our guests can go behind the scenes and see those penguins. And we like to give them the special card here. So I mentioned that some penguins that we have at Wonders of Wildlife have these bands that are on their flippers. And that's to tell whether their names, which penguin they are, and whether they're male or female. And so it's really easy for us to do that. Also, the story about the Humboldt penguin in Japan, his band was purple, and that's where he got the name Grape. So to answer your question, Gen 2s are my favorite just because they're so fast. They're really cool to work with. And yeah.
That is awesome. And we had some students as well. And I know a couple of these are a little bit technical of questions, but some students who were curious, you know, the idea of a 6+ foot penguin might feel a little intimidating, and it kind of makes you wonder why it is they're not still 6 feet tall. So we had some students who are wondering kind of evolutionary wise, why it was that penguins have changed in some of the ways that they've changed.
Yeah, so that's a great question that I know a little bit about. So penguins have actually adapted and evolved in their feet to walk longer distances. So although their waddle may seem a little bit clumsy, and you know, there's all those documentaries about them happen to fall down and slide around on the ice, it's actually so that they can walk very long distances. And so that's why that adaptation has brought them down from 6'6" down to about, the tallest penguin 3.5 to 4 feet tall. Also, it's the same with the ancestors that lived thousands of years ago. And granted, the 6'6" penguin was 37 million years ago. But in that area, scientists have theorized that there was more oxygen in our atmosphere that led to larger animals. So that's why the ancestor, the armadillo, is going to be, the size of a cow. That's why woolly mammoths are going to be as large as they are. Just a bit more oxygen in the air for them to breathe and get as large as they are. And then, of course, as less oxygen and the earth, adapts a little bit more, the smaller things are going to get.
Wow. And speaking of ancestors to modern animals, I know we spoke about a couple of them today, the penguin very much included, but students were wondering if there are any other animals that maybe they or their ancestors lived among dinosaurs that might surprise us or that you think are interesting.
Absolutely. So one of the most famous ones are going to be alligators and crocodiles, right? So we like to call them modern day dinosaurs because they haven't changed much over the 66 million years that we know of that they've been on Earth. So they lived right alongside those dinosaurs and hung out with them. Of course, there are several animals, including the modern day ancestor of mammals, a lot of mammals on Earth that lived alongside dinosaurs. They were just quite a bit smaller. Even whales had a mammal ancestor that walked on land and then eventually returned to the ocean and grew to be the giant whales that we know today. Oh. And that's actually due to gravity, because in the water, they're not subject to gravity, and their skeleton's able to hold more of a giant mass.
Wow, that is so cool and so interesting. It's really interesting to see how, in some cases, the way that animals have evolved haven't always taken a super linear path. So a lot of that history is so interesting. We had some students who are wondering as well, and I know we get this question with each of these classes, but we saw that we've got some folks who are able to really get up close and work with these animals. And for students who are really passionate about animals and about working with animals, they're wondering, do you have any thoughts or any advice for how they could pursue a career working with animals, and what types of careers working with animals exist?
Absolutely. So I love getting this question, and I like to say, don't do what I did. I studied history in college, and so I'm able to give really unique lessons in the history department here at Wonders of Wildlife that include animals and their history, which is a pretty unique thing. But if you want to work with animals or work with our keepers, the best thing to do is to get an animal biology degree, wildlife biology, or marine biology degrees. It's the easiest way is to go through that college experience, learn as much about biology as you possibly can, maybe even chemistry, because we do have a lot of chemists that work in coordinating our pH levels in the water of our exhibits, including the penguin exhibit. And so the best thing to do is to study that. I would say intern with your local aquarium or zoo, or just anywhere that has wildlife available, even a farm, if you live out maybe in more of a rural area. So just try and get as much experience working around animals as possible, learn as much as you can. And of course, always visit your local zoos and aquariums, because they're gonna have a lot of info there that you might not learn otherwise. And you'll get up close and personal with a lot of their animals. Find maybe the species that you love. So maybe you're a snake person and you wanna go into herpetology, getting around those snakes and being able to learn as much as possible is going to be very important for formulating that future career for you. And then of course, maybe you like livestock or, horses. And so you want to get around the animal that you want to work with the most. So that's what I would encourage. If you do want to work with penguins specifically, try and find a zoo or aquarium that has penguins and do your best to get on that team working with them.
Awesome. And, everyone here who's passionate about working with animals has already taken a really great first step in coming and joining us in today's class to learn a little bit more from Justin and from Wonders of Wildlife. We had lots of students who are really excited about the absolutely adorable video of the penguins at Wonders of Wildlife, who are wondering, we know the penguins eat fish, but are there other things that penguins eat? And do they eat the same sorts of things under your care that they would eat out in the wild? Yeah,
absolutely. So penguins will also eat squid. I know the The really tall penguin that we talked about was the main predator of squid and krill in the ocean 37 million years ago. But penguins today will eat fish, they will eat squid, and we just try to replicate their natural diet that they would get swimming around in the wild here at Wonders of Wildlife. So we prep it the same way. We make sure that they're getting all their nutrients and vitamins that they need. And so they're able to have as natural of a diet as humanly possible.
That is wonderful. And actually, really similar follow-up question for students wondering, well, we can find penguins in all sorts of, zoos and aquariums and places that maybe don't always mimic the climates that those penguins are from. So how is it that places like Wonders of Wildlife and others would be able to care for these animals and make sure that they're in the right space for themselves, even if the climate doesn't necessarily match where they'd live in the wild?
Yeah, so if you ever do a penguin experience here at Wonders of Wildlife where we take you back in the bag, you'll learn very quickly that the room with all the penguins is cold and you should have brought a coat, which is what I told myself several times when I've been back there. But their exhibit is temperature checked constantly. We got to keep it as cold as possible. I believe that exhibit is somewhere around 40 degrees Fahrenheit. And you'll notice that they have water in there so they can swim around and perform all the natural habits that they would form in the wild. That water, super, super cold. I want to say that's around 36 to 40 degrees Fahrenheit. It's absolutely freezing. And we do have divers that get in there weekly in that freezing cold water to clean that exhibit. I've asked them multiple times if it's, how that feels. And they say after a while, your body goes numb and then you don't feel it. But other zoos and aquariums might have other types of penguins. So remember when I was talking about where penguins live, they live in the southern hemisphere. There's a lot of different climates that you can find in the southern hemisphere. And so some penguins may be from the Antarctic, where it's super cold, right? But other penguins are going to be from South America or South Africa, where things are going to be a little bit warmer. So you might have an area where things are super, super cold in a zoo or aquarium like we have, or you might find penguins that like a bit warmer of a climate, and so it'll be more open air. And so maybe they're not getting as cold. And so those zoos and aquariums are just trying to replicate the natural habitat of those penguins as much as possible.
Wow, and that's a really great point that we don't always think about it. We consider penguins, and I know at least for me personally, the amount that they've been on marketing material around Christmas time and all sorts of kind of holiday themed things, it makes us consider very snowy environments for these penguins. But as you've told us, that's not always where they live. So we always get lots of really wonderful questions, and you've already answered several of them around what I'll call penguin superlatives: the biggest penguin and the smallest penguin and the fastest and the fluffiest. Are there any other favorite penguin superlatives that you'd like to talk about? Any traits that you think are interesting for specific types of penguins?
That's a very interesting question. So of course we got the emperor penguin, who's going to be the tallest, but right under him is the king penguin, which is just a little bit shorter than him. But I just like the way that they're named, because kings and then emperors, emperors are a little bit more on the hierarchy than kings would be. So I just like the way that they are named.
That is super cool.
Oh yeah. So another thing I wanted to talk about really fast before we wrap things up is a great way to study penguins is also to go to Antarctica. There are people who study penguins in Antarctica, but a little bit of warning for everyone who might want to do that. They are snowed in at the South Pole for about 6 months at a time. There's about 30 to 40 scientists who actually live down there for 6 months with no plane home, no boat to get them anywhere, and no car to really get them anywhere. So those scientists have their own pizza shop. They grow some of their own veggies, and they monitor the South Pole as well as penguins and some of the other Antarctic animals. A really fun anecdote is once the last plane that has all their supplies on it leaves for those 6 months in the winter, they all sit down together as a group and watch 2 movies. And they're both scary movies. So unfortunately, kiddos out there, I'm going to advise that you do not watch these anytime soon. Maybe when you're down at the South Pole, you can watch them. But it's called The Shining, which is about a man who goes crazy after being locked in a hotel in Colorado by the snow, and The Thing, which is about an alien who attacks a South Pole research facility. So again, super scary movies. I wouldn't recommend to anyone, but I really like those movies myself.
Wow, well, that seems like quite the bonding experience for a group of researchers who will be inevitably spending a lot of time with one another after that point. We've got time for probably just a couple more questions. Yeah. And we had some students who were wondering, I know you mentioned that these penguins evolved to be able to, travel farther distances, or at least to be able to more easily waddle around and travel. So we had some questions around how far a particular penguin might travel in its life. Do they tend to stay toward the same area? Do they tend to migrate to different areas? What is their kind of range?
So that's a great question. So I mentioned that the emperor penguin, the male, takes care of the egg, incubates that egg while the female goes away to get food. Sometimes they can be in really remote places in Antarctica. And so the female will actually have to travel a very long distance in order to get to the water to get those fish and bring food back to the emperor penguin. So that being said, I don't have a rough number for how many miles or how many meters they may travel in, a certain breeding time or anything like that. I just know that their legs did evolve to walk those great distances.
Very, very cool. Now, we spent a lot of time talking about penguins today, and we even got to see some of the penguins that are under your care at Wonders of Wildlife. We had some students who were wondering, and for those of you who haven't caught some of our previous lessons with Wonders of Wildlife, that should answer your question to some extent, but who are wondering what other sorts of animals are under your care.
So that's a great question. We have over 850 species of animals here at Wonders of Wildlife that we care for, including a ton of fish, reptiles, invertebrates, birds, and mammals that we have here that we take care of. So some of our famous are our bald eagle, which is also a bird like our penguins. We have a giant American alligator. He's about 10 feet long. His name is Rex. We talked a little bit about alligators today. And my favorite animals to work with, although I love the penguins, just happen to be our snakes. And my favorite snake, Lucille, is a ball python, which maybe some of you have as a pet out there. But she's super sweet, one of my favorites to hang out with and show off to people. We also have Bebo, who is a three-banded armadillo from South America. We talked a little bit about armadillos today. He's also super cute and really small and a crowd favorite. But we take care of quite a few animals here at Wonders of Wildlife. We have an excellent life science team who cares for their every need and make sure that they're properly fed, taken care of, and of course, loved.
And speaking of, we had some students who are wondering, we know penguins are in and out of the water, but for some of your more aquatic creatures, for those who are interested in more of kind of a veterinary role, do you train differently to take care of animals that are under the water? And how is the process of caring for those animals a little different?
Yes, of course. So some of our animals, if they need to be moved off of the water exhibits, we'll have pools in our behind the scenes areas where those fish are taken and they're taken care of separately from the group. So what we'll do is just have divers go down there, separate them, put them in a little holding tank where maybe we take care of them that way. So yes, training for those animals does take quite a bit of time to train for. You got to know what to look for in a fish. Fish are going to behave differently than, say, a mammal or a reptile. And so you just have to be able to look out for those things and know what to care for in them. We also have an awesome vet staff that comes through and checks our animals all the time, make sure everyone's in tip-top shape.
That is awesome. And as you mentioned earlier, whether it's helping with the cleaning or the care of the animals. It sounds like maybe, you know, being a little hardy to temperature differences is a helpful thing to prepare for as well. Now, we are getting close to that time. So do you have any other final thoughts for students, whether it's students interested in learning more about penguins specifically, learning more about what you do at Wonders of Wildlife, or just wanting to learn more about animals?
Yeah, so one thing that I'm going to always say to you guys is never stop learning. In order to save our animals and make sure that our world is taken care of, we're just going to need people that are like you guys out there in this crowd right now that are educating themselves, that are listening and going out of their way to hang out with educators like me and learn just a little bit more about the beautiful natural world that we have out there. I would also encourage everyone to go out and experience that natural world as much as possible. Go camping, go fishing, go hunting. Just go out there and, you know, get an appreciation for the world that we have. Here in the United States, we have quite a bit of land. We're a very large country, and so we have a lot of land that people need to go out and experience. Go camping. That's going to get you an appreciation for the natural world around you, and also for the animals that call that home. So never stop learning, and make sure to go out and live life and experience it as much as possible, because it's going to change your whole life and change your whole perspective.
That is awesome. Thank you so much once again, Justin. And thank you to the entire team at Wonders of Wildlife and for all of you who tuned in and asked such thoughtful and sometimes specific questions. Now we're going to have Wonders of Wildlife back to rejoin us and talk turkey a little bit in November. So we hope to see everyone back then. But in the meantime, we hope to see you all in another Star Course series class soon. And don't forget to post those selfies and tag us here at Varsity Tutors as well as Wonders of Wildlife to win. Thanks so much, everybody.
Thanks.